breaking down some of your Dynasty trades. We did this video a couple weeks ago. You guys seem to really enjoy it. So today we're going to be grading your Dynasty trades of varying formats and, various team situations. Some of you guys were rebuilding when you made these trades. Some of you guys were competing when you made these trades. Should be a good insight into some real money trades, real Dynasty League trades that are going on in leagues right now, and a good insight into some market value. So if you guys enjoy, you know what to do. Leave a like, subscribe, comment down below any Dynasty trades that you have, and we will answer those for you. But Danny, how you doing?
Doing well, doing well. Yeah, we are ready to put these teachers' caps on. Classes in session. But before we go through the first trade, as always, you know what we got to do.
All right, so most of these trades came from our Discord server. I farmed it out to Twitter as well. And we're going to just give our rapid fire thoughts on these trades and then give grades of standard, A plus, A minus, B plus, B minus, C, D, F, all that kind of stuff. So let's start off with Chan Hughes, who is a Mother Flocker tier member over on Flock Fantasy. He gets to skip the line even in videos like this, even though it's not technically Dynasty decisions. He made a trade yesterday or recently where he sent away Geno Smith and Keontae Ingram in a super flex format for Jahan Dotson. So team context-wise, he already has Justin Herbert. He already has Lamar Jackson. He already has Aaron Rodgers. So Geno Smith, his third quarterback, his fourth quarterback, depending on how you feel about Aaron Rodgers. And then Keontae Ingram, just kind of like a upside handcuff to James Conner for a solidified, stable, wide receiver 2-3 type in Dynasty. What are your thoughts on this deal?
Yeah, I mean, if we're looking at this trade right now, in terms of pure market value, like you kind of said, I think it's pretty fair. I personally would have Jahan Dotson over Geno Smith, but I do think in the macro market, their ADPs are probably pretty closer from a startup value perspective. However, anytime I get the chance to bet on a 23-year-old young ascending wide receiver who I think has the potential to be a top 20 level guy if he reaches his ceiling versus Geno Smith, while I think he can be, a fine mid-range quarterback too for the time being, I don't really think there's as much, value insulation here compared to what Jahan Dotson represents. So if I'm talking straight now, right now, who I'd take in a startup, it would be Jahan Dotson, and who I think is going to be worth more within the next 3 years, it's still going to be Jahan Dotson. So I will take that side. Keontae Ingram, not really much of a point to discuss him in this trio. The main meat and potatoes happens to be with Jahan Dotson and with Geno Smith.
Yeah, I have Jahan Dotson inside my top 50 overall
Yeah.
players in Superflex, and I have Geno Smith in the 90s. So I actually have a pretty decent discrepancy between these guys. I'm a little skeptical of Geno Smith. I think they're going to go a little bit more run heavy this year. And Geno, he was bad for 10 years and good for one. So I'm not exactly sure that he's going to be this superstar quarterback that leads any teams to the promised land. So I like that trade for you. I'm going to give that one an A. I think that was a good trade. I don't think you blew it out of the water, but I definitely like your side.
Yep. No, I agree with you there. I would also give that an A for Chan's side.
Yeah. All right. So let's get into the next team here, which is from Powerman29, also a Mother Flocker tier member. 12-team PPR, 6-point per passing touchdown. He says that his team is in a state of anything less than a championship is a fail this year. And his team is friggin' loaded, man. Bijan, Brees, Gibbs are his top running backs. Plus, he has depth too, like Swift and guys like that on his bench. Chase, AJ Brown, now Stephon Diggs after this trade, Drake London, Keenan Allen, Elijah Moore, a bunch of depth on that position too. Quarterbacks, he has Lamar, Lawrence, Purdy, and now Trey Lance. And he also has Kyle Pitts as his tight end. So he is literally loaded at every single position. This trade that he made, actually the second that you see there, yes, it is his second round pick, but for some reason, this league has a snake draft. So his second next year will actually be high, even though he's expected to be probably the best team in his league. So what are your thoughts on this deal? How do you kind of break this down? For me, I look at this and I go, Stephon Diggs is probably worth CJ Stroud, give or take. In his situation, I would say Diggs versus Stroud is a real conversation. I would take Stroud in a neutral situation, but I think Diggs versus Stroud is probably similar in his situation.
Yeah, no, I would agree. For me, this is pretty easy, right? The way I kind of see it, on face value, you could probably say it's a fair deal, like we kind of said. Diggs offering a lot more short-term upside from a point production standpoint than Pittman, whereas CJ Stroud more value insulation than Trey Lance. So I do understand the type of situation why the other guy would make this move. He's probably a team that's not going to be ready to contend this year, sees that Power Man has a strong roster, says, hey, listen, I want that young franchise quarterback to build around. So I think it's a fair deal. However, from Power Man's perspective, I do really like this deal because although I don't really like the, ensuring your quarterback spot, like all the downside risk you have for Trey Lance is baked into the upside that you have by holding Brock Purdy. So realistically, unless, Sam Darnold's the majority starter this year, you're going to have the San Francisco starting quarterback. And if that's the case, if Trey Lance starts, obviously you're getting that rushing upside. And if Brock Purdy starts, obviously you're getting, that Kirk Cousins-esque efficient type of passing attack that he was able to display last year. So for me personally, you're getting an advantage at wide receiver. You're getting upside at the quarterback position, which you're still back for by having Brock Purdy, and getting that second rounder on top, which is probably going to figure into the 201 to the 203 given the snake format. I really like the deal for you. Obviously, it's not going to be a home run A+ type of deal, but a solid B, I would say.
Yeah, I'd give this one like a B+, A-. I'm not even
Yeah.
high on Trey Lance, but this is, a pretty good situation for you. And I mean, there's also the upside that Purdy is the long-term starter for San Francisco, and Trey Lance gets traded and is better in a new situation. Then you have 4 starting quarterbacks instead of 3, or whatever the 49ers quarterback situation ends up becoming. So I like that trade for you. I think that's like a B+, A- type of deal. Go out and win your championship, because obviously your team is in a very good spot. Dr. Brian Harris, the next trade that we have here, we always love us some elite quarterbacks, and sending a bunch of noise for one is always really fun. A 2024 and a 2025 first also does not look like his own 2024 first. I'm not sure where that first is projected to be, but let's just kind of assume both of those picks are mid. This is at least 1 first rounder too short, right? For Lamar Jackson, Tajay Spears, Jaden Reed, they're fine, low back end second round, early third round valuations in terms of rookie picks. The 2024 third rounder is not moving the needle. Donovan Peoples-Jones isn't moving the needle. Lamar Jackson, you got rid of some bench spots for Lamar Jackson, basically.
Yeah, and it's like, okay, maybe, it's a deeper starting lineup. You even give the other side a train of thought, but no.
It's a start 9, which is
it's a
not
start
even
fucking
it's
9.
a very shallow starting lineup. So
it could have been a start
A+
13.
Deal. This is you took him to the woodshed.
Well, I was going to give some benefit of the doubt to the other guy, because even realistically in a start 13, you're still taking Lamar, but I fully agree. It is an A+. Start 9 format. You're getting a guy with legitimate, 3,500 passing yards, 30+ passing touchdown upside, while being, potentially a 1,200+ rushing yard type of player. So with Lamar Jackson, obviously we know he's got league winning upside. I don't really have to validate it too much more. A+.
Yeah, absolutely. So we can move on to the next trade here, which is from QuickSix. So clearly a Quentin Johnston believer, a Quentin Johnston stan. So he goes out and acquires him in exchange for Deontay Johnson, a first and a second. Now he says those picks are going to be really late. Like they're, one of the best teams in the league's picks. So those late picks and the 24 second that he's getting is going to be really early. So you're getting probably like a 4-5 pick discrepancy from 110 to 112 versus the 201, 202 that you're going to get back on your side, which again, when you see a first and a second, it seems like a big discrepancy, but in this situation, it's probably not that big of a discrepancy. And then a late second on top of that to get a better asset at wide receiver. I have Deontay Johnson about 7 or 8 spots lower than I have Quentin Johnson, but I am inherently a lot higher on Deontay Johnson, so that could be why. I don't know. How do you break this thing down? I think if you love Quentin Johnson, this is probably an adequate risk, and I think the upside for Quentin Johnson hitting is so much higher than potentially the other side of this trade.
Well, 100%. Deontay Johnson has a wide receiver 15 season. He's the wide receiver 30 in terms of Dynasty. If Quentin Johnson has a wide receiver 15 season, he quite possibly might be the wide receiver 13 in Dynasty. So big difference here, obviously, with the youth of Quentin Johnson. That's kind of why you're attracted to that. The high end range of outcome where he's a, let's just say 1,050/1,100 yard, 12 touchdown type of wide receiver, maybe Mike Will or Keenan Allen misses time, and you have that type of market ceiling with what Quentin Johnson could be. Because realistically, as much as I like Deontay Johnson, I don't really think the market views him in a way where he could be a big riser. So even if he shows strong peripherals, has 160+ targets again, has 1,000+ receiving yards, and obviously regresses positively from the touchdown department, unless he's like the wide receiver 5. He's pretty much lockstep into that wide receiver 20 to 25 range as his pure ceiling. So for me personally, it's if you're contemplating it, that first going to be late, that second's going to be early. Let's just say there's a 5 pick buffer there. And then you're also giving up, let's just say the 207, 208 on. I don't mind making this move, especially if you're in a position to be able to give up that type of depth.
Yeah, and I would assume, given this trade, you're probably in a position where you're not competing. So the value accumulation potential of Quentin Johnson is more appealing to you. If you were in a competitive window, I think Deontay Johnson will definitely outscore Quentin Johnson this year from a redraft perspective. But it's also possible that Quentin Johnson has, like you said, kind of like a Chris Olave type rookie season. And if he does, I think wide receiver 13 might be underselling it. If he's attached to Justin Herbert and has 1,100 yards and 10 touchdowns as a rookie, he might be a top 5 dynasty wide receiver this time next year.
Well, there's a big discussion. Let's just say hypothetically, Amon St. Brown averages, 18, 19 PPR points per game, similar to what he was doing last year. Do you think Amon St. Brown on that type of production like he showed last year per game, or Quentin Johnson on a 1,050/1,100 yard, 10 plus touchdown rookie season tied to Justin Herbert? Who do you think would be valued more by the consensus?
I think QJ probably would, because
I
we
think so
love
too.
young wide receivers. We love, to project forward, and, if he has that good of a season, every peripheral is going to be on his side. He's probably going to have a good receiving grade on PFF. He's probably going to have a high target share, probably was really efficient yards per route run wise. So I would assume Quentin Johnson, at least as the offseason goes along next year, would probably end up surpassing a lot of receivers, just the way that, Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave, and Drake London, some of these guys have done this past year. So yeah, I like your side of that. I think, at face value is probably an even deal. I'm going to just give that one a B.
Yeah, I think B plus would probably be my range as well.
Cool. So let's get into the next trade here, which is from Brock, a super flex, full PPR, 10-team, start 9. So he prioritized giving depth for studs in a more shallow format. He is contending. So he goes after the aforementioned Amon-Ra St. Brown, sends away Terry McLaurin, the 203 Fab Bucks, don't care, and a 2025 second rounder. So you get yourself a locked and loaded top 10 dynasty wide receiver. And from like a redraft perspective, a guy that will probably outscore Terry McLaurin by 4 or 5 points per game, I'd imagine. And all you're really giving up is probably, like you said, some kind of depth assets in a shallow format.
Yeah, I mean, I love this deal. Not to mention, you didn't even clarify the fact that you're also getting 3 years younger, moving down from Terry McLaurin to Amon St. Brown. You're getting the high end, like Corey said, production ceiling. A guy who's going in the top 15 of redraft leagues right now versus a guy who's going in the 4th, 5th round type of area. So for me personally, you're upgrading your production by a ton, and you're also upgrading your longevity by a ton. And the only real pieces that you have to pay are the 203.
Kendre Miller.
It's like the 201, I guess, in a 12-teamer. So maybe like you're looking at Kendre, Devon A-Chain, Zach Charbonnet. Sure. Yeah. Levis, someone like that. And then the 2025 second, if you're a contender and you're expecting that pick, well, it's not your own pick, but like that pick's not really going to be in your window right now per se anyway. So this is the type of price I have to pay to upgrade, like I said, both production and longevity. I'm all for it.
Yeah, I mean, your goal when you're contending is to get more value over replacement out of your starting lineup, especially in a start 9, 10-teamer. That's definitely going to be valuable for you, having Amon-Ra as your wide receiver 2 or your wide receiver 3 or in your flex spot, however good your team is. So let's move on over to the next trade here. I think that trade for me was probably like an A, like a solid A. You got what you needed. You on the same page there? Okay, so let's move on to the next trade. We have FFSnoog. Shout out to him. He's a decent Twitter follow there. 12-team, super flex, 6 point per passing touchdown. He is in lockstep with us. I mean, we're all about buying Kyler Murray this offseason, and he gives up his teammate James Conner, Aaron Rodgers, and a 2024 first. I don't know if he clarified where that first is, but as long as that is not a top 4 pick, which I would assume it probably isn't, otherwise he wouldn't have traded it away. If that's a mid to late first, this is a smash, like an absolute smash. James Conner is worth an early third, a late second. Aaron Rodgers worth like a mid second, especially if you're in a contending window. But neither of those, both of those guys might be irrelevant this time next year. Like legitimately, like one retires and the other one can't find a job.
Yeah, and I mean, go try and trade away James Conner and Aaron Rodgers on the market right now for anyone watching who's like, oh, well, you know what? With Kyler's injury, maybe you could have gotten more for those pieces. Nobody right now is trading for James Conner and Aaron Rodgers. You would need like the biggest biased Jets fan or a Cardinals fan who somehow thinks they're still going to make the playoffs. But even in that scenario, Kyler Murray wouldn't be sold back. So it's really tricky selling either of those guys. So you move off both pieces, like Corey said, who doesn't really have much shelf life past this year from a value standpoint. And the 2024 first, I feel like we can break it down into 3 ways. If it's early, obviously, you probably wouldn't have made this deal, and if it was early, I would favor the pick side. But if it's mid, late, like Corey said, just give me the Kyler Murray. Give me the superstar fantasy quarterback who can be a top 5 quarterback as soon as he comes back from that knee injury. So for me personally, this is the definition of buying low on a franchise cornerstone in Dynasty.
Yeah, and even if that pick was early, unless it's like guaranteed 101, I would still take Kyler Murray. If it was going to be Harrison, like I would still take Murray personally. So I think that's an A+ trade. You buying low on elite quarterbacks is definitely always a good call. DmoSellane, 5.5 PPR, 2 running backs, 3 wide receiver, 2 flex. He is contending, and his other running backs are CMC and Kendre Miller, other wide receivers, CeeDee Lamb, Olave, JSN, Deontay, and Jameson Williams. So, I mean, you say you're contending other than, CMC. I see a lot of young players here, so maybe address that situation as like a side note. Maybe trade JMO for somebody a little bit more productive this year or something like that. But he does make a trade here where he gets Rashee Rice, James Cook, and Tank Bigsby in exchange for Calvin Ridley, Gus Edwards, and Puka Nacua. So I'm not a huge fan of really many of these prospects outside of Tank Bigsby. I don't think Rashee Rice is very good. I don't think James Cook is going to be all that special. I think in your situation, when you're a competing team, just give me Calvin Ridley.
Yeah, the problem I have here is that Ridley's market value doesn't really reflect right now the production value he can give you, in my opinion, in Dynasty. Because right now, I mean, he's a guy that we both have valued as, late 2, early 3 redraft options. So for us personally, like Calvin Ridley is a guy we are buying. We're not selling him away. So for me personally, Calvin Ridley, I would have kept that package. Personally, in your situation, because you said you're contending, I would have maybe tried to see what type of point production JSN would have bought you. Because I do think, given the JSN, hype train that we've been kind of seeing, I think everybody universally right now has him at least as a top 15, in some circles possibly as a top 10 overall Dynasty wide receiver. If your goal was to buy some point production, and it looks like it was in this case, I personally would have tried to leverage JSN to see maybe, how if the guy, I mean, Gibbs probably wouldn't be reasonable because he probably took Gibbs over JSN, but, anybody in that range. So Breece Hall, Jonathan Taylor, somebody like that, I would have maybe tried to see if you can tier up from JSN to get one of those backs if your goal was to get another contending piece.
Yeah, or you could go for a wide receiver like Hill or Diggs or somebody like that, using Jackson Smith and Jigba as well. It almost looks like to me like you realize you didn't have a lot of running back depth, and you wanted James Cook and Tank Bigsby to help fill out your depth. And honestly, like, you can find in-season production at running back for like really inexpensive. Jeff Wilson might start like 7 games for the Dolphins next year, and you might be able to get him for like a mid to late third. So I probably would have waited until that actually became an issue. And also I would have sold somebody that is not relevant to your competitive window. Like you said, JSN or Jameson Williams to me would have been the perfect guy to go out and sell for a contending running back. You could probably sell Jameson Williams on most markets right now for Aaron Jones at least, if not somebody better than him. I probably would have done something like that instead.
Yeah, and I will say that's also a good caveat to keep in mind as well, is I don't think any of the pieces you got in return help you contend. Like maybe James Cook gets in a majority role there with Damian Harris in Buffalo. Maybe, Tank Bigsby's got some insulation to Jacksonville. ETN maybe misses a game or two, and then Rashee Rice, you guys know our thoughts on Rashee Rice if you've seen our content, but I just don't see any type of leverage piece. Like there's no like James Conner coming back, or there's no like even like Darren Waller. Like there's no real like potential difference maker at their position. You know what I mean? That's the problem I have with it.
Yeah, absolutely. So I would say this deal was probably like a D. I think it didn't accomplish your goal. That's why I think it's a bad trade. You were contending. You traded away a contending wide receiver for guys that, like Danny said, are probably not going to help you contend. And probably you made this move because you needed depth at running back. And I think that was kind of a panic trade. So I don't agree with that move. So we did not agree on everything. So far, we had, nothing but sunshine and blue skies for the first couple trades. But that one I definitely do not like. Ryan, the next trade that we have here, 12-team full PPR. He said it is switching to superflex for 2024. So this trade that he makes, he sells Deshaun Watson and a 2025 second, a 2024 third in exchange for Kyler Murray and a first in 2025. So by 2025, that will be a superflex first rounder, which definitely is helpful. And also, how big of a difference is there between Kyler Murray and Deshaun Watson, especially if you're not competing? If you're not competing, there's literally no difference. And almost I would prefer Kyler Murray, knowing that he's not going to give you much point production if you're trying to tank your own first.
In your perspective, assuming like Corey said, you're trying to kill some of your point production, I think we've actually gone through either in the DMs or on the Dynasty decisions, and that would be the case. Because I do remember you saying one of your teams was switching to a super flex in 2024. For me personally, like this has got to be an A. Like for me, Deshaun Watson and Kyler Murray are well within the same tier in terms of my super flex rankings. And going from a second and a third to a first round pick, once your league is ready to go back to superflex, once guys like, Drew Aller and fucking Nicholas Singleton and, all these fucking stud 2025 guys come up, you're going to be thanking yourself that you moved within tier and then upgraded those picks so vastly, because realistically, the difference between the second and third versus the first is massive.
Yeah, and I'm quite literally have Watson at 11 and Kyler at 12 in
12.
my
Yeah.
overall startup rankings. They're literally back to back. And like I said, if I knew in like a league setting where I know my team, if I knew I was trying to tank my own pick, I would straight up prefer Kyler Murray to Deshaun Watson, let alone getting the pick buffer there. So yeah, I think that's an A+. I think you accomplished,
Yep.
if that was your goal, was to shed your team of production, I think that's an A+ trade,
Yep.
netting a first rounder and a similarly ranked quarterback. So David, the next team that we have here, he's a 12-team full PPR, a 2-point per tight end premium. So definitely very valuable to the tight end position. Start 9 contender. He said he also has Deontay Johnson. It was the 204 that he traded along with a 4th for the 201, and he took Sam Laporta. And he said, frankly, he just wanted Elijah Moore, basically. So he trades away George Pickens for Elijah Moore, and he nets a 2nd. So I actually have Elijah Moore rated higher than George Pickens in my Dynasty rankings. And that's not a common market sentiment. Most people would prefer George Pickens, I would assume. But for me, this is an easy W of a trade because I love Elijah Moore, and I think he's better than George Pickens. And they're both like the same age. So I'd take Elijah Moore there.
Yeah, I don't mind that as well. For me personally, it's like they're the same tier. You're getting a plus on top of Elijah Moore. It's already a W for me. And the fact that you said in a 2 PPR tight end premium, you're able to use the asset you got with the Elijah Moore plus to go out and get a guy like Sam Laporta, who, again, in that type of format, could potentially be a difference maker for you. We're basically netting the deal as Elijah Moore plus Sam Laporta for George Pickens plus a 4th. And in that instance, it's Elijah Moore and Sam Laporta pretty easily for me.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, definitely a great trade there. I would say market value would probably say that was like a B trade, but I think it was an A because I'm higher on Moore and lower on Pickens respectively. So I'll say TcayFF 12-team superflex PPR start 10 startup trade. So we're gonna have to get a little creative in terms of relative market value here. The 103 is consensus Jalen Hurts. I'm just gonna say it was Jalen Hurts that the guy traded up for, or that TK traded up for. He gives up. He got the 103. He got the 803. He gives up a 2024 first, the 111, which right now in my rankings is just Deshaun Watson, and the 611. So the difference between the 611 and 803, not substantial. You're probably talking like Brandon Ayuk versus George Pickens or something like that. And the 1502 is not really all that relevant. So the bones of this trade is basically use your first rounder next year and your 111 to go up and get Jalen Hurts from Deshaun Watson. Are you okay paying this price for Jalen Hurts?
Yes, in a heartbeat. Actually, it's one of the deals I would personally make myself because, like you kind of said, 103, 803. The difference between 803 and 611 in that type of range is like, yeah, there's a little bit of a difference. Don't get me wrong, but the difference I find between the 111 and the 2024 first versus the 103 outweigh that. So for me personally, it's Jalen Hurts versus, let's just say, Deshaun Watson a first. I don't know, George Pickens. And then the 1502 is irrelevant to me. And the 803 is like maybe Deontay Johnson.
Yeah, literally. I have so at 611 right now in my rankings, I have Kirk Cousins rated there right now. And then at 803 in my rankings, I have Jared Goff. So 2 quarterbacks. Like they're literally not all that different in value. And that's kind of the difference that we're talking about there. So yeah, I'm okay paying this for Jalen Hurts. In a startup, I think it's somewhat sketchy just because you lose a little bit of depth. And then you're probably, forced into a competitive window because you gave up your 2024 first. And I don't necessarily want to make that decision right away in a startup to go out and, compete right away. But I mean, presumably you also have the 202. You probably got another quarterback there. Maybe you go Hurts and Prescott, or Hurts and, whoever falls to that point. Maybe Watson falls to that point. And you can go with those guys and head out your quarterback position. Or maybe you grab, Bijan Robinson at that point if you're in a competitive window.
Yeah, I mean, it gives you more options. Not to mention, like I'm more willing to do this too because I'm always going to use the high capital on a quarterback anyways, and you're getting your information right away. If you're taking Jalen Hurts at the 103 and you're making this move and you're already giving up your 24 first, at least that comes right away, so you know exactly what's happening. That's more of the problem I have when I'm trading up, like in the round 3-4 area. Why I typically do not want to touch my first is because I know I'm not getting a quarterback asset in return. We've said it multiple times, but as long as the asset you're trading up for is a franchise type of quarterback, the 2024 first to give up is less hurting, or it hurts less basically than as if it was, a wide receiver, running back, or tight end.
Yeah, and I mean, I've done now 3 videos ranking the top 10 quarterbacks, running backs, and wide receivers of the 2024 class, and it's a good class, don't get me wrong, but come 109, 110, 111, 112, we might be faced with the exact same decision that we were faced with this year, where we're like, do I really want Will Levis, Zach Charbonnet, Devon A-Chain, these guys. It's not like you're giving up Marvin Harrison in this trade. So we can move on to the next. Actually, we'll grade this one first. What do you think? This is like a solid B trade. I think it's risky, but I think it's a pretty solid, worthwhile trade.
This is an A- for me. I love the intent. I love the goal here. I do think in some leagues it might have been a little bit cheaper, but in the majority of sharp leagues, this is going to be the cost if you want to go up and get a top 3 quarterback, and I'm more than fine paying it, like I kind of said, any day of the week. So for me personally, it'd be an A-.
Yeah, and it's also possible that Allen or Mahomes fell to 103, and that's why he traded up as well.
Maybe.
So definitely a pretty solid move there. Taylor is the next team we're going to talk about, a 10-team, 2-quarterback PPR league. He is contending. He said he lost to the guy he traded with in the championship last year. So both teams are contenders in this trade. He receives Patrick Mahomes, who's obviously the best asset in Dynasty. Najee Harris, Justin Fields, and a 2024 first is what he gave up. Again, we're both assuming that these guys are trying to win the championship this year, so it's going to be a late pick. You want Mahomes here?
It's Patrick Mahomes. It's an A+ deal. Even if you told me that an extra first, maybe an extra first and a second was on the attached to the other side, I would still take Mahomes. Like it is Patrick Mahomes. Anytime, especially not to mention it's a 2 QB league, not even a super flex. So the quarterback position is even more vaulted up. So getting that for surefire, best overall player on the planet in the prime of his career, and all it costs you on top of Justin Fields, who is exciting in his own right, can potentially jump up to that tier next year. But the certainty you have with Mahomes is unlike any other player in Dynasty. So like I said, 25-year-old running back coming off a down year. So what? 2024 first, that give or take, if you're getting Patrick Mahomes, should be a contending first, which will probably land in the 108 to 112 area. It's Patrick Mahomes. I don't need to think more about it.
Yeah, I will say from like a redraft perspective, it wouldn't shock me if Justin Fields and Mahomes were close in terms of like overall point production, but the long-term stability of Patrick Mahomes is kind of what you're chasing in this trade. And I would assume, I mean, if you're a competitive team, you probably already also have like Jalen Hurts or another great quarterback on your team. So having the positional advantage of both of those guys, potentially, if it's Mahomes that you have or Lamar that you have or whatever quarterback you might have on your roster, is definitely going to help, give you a leg up against this guy and any other competitive teams in your league. So I don't think it's an A+ deal. I think you probably gave up a decent amount for him, but I do like the deal still. So I'll say it was an A-.
Respectable.
All right, so let's move on to Chad Mcrad's team. This will be one of the last ones that we end up covering here. So let's take a look at this trade here from Chad. He has a pretty strong roster. He has, good quarterbacks, good running backs, good wide receivers, good tight end. He's trying to compete this year by all accounts. And AJ Brown, a 2024 first, which he lists here as a pretty high chance that this guy's first could end up being like in the middle of the round, maybe at the higher point of the round, because he traded up and needed a quarterback too in this trade. So the nuts and bolts of this, I mean, Josh Palmer, Jake Ferguson, the third rounders, like I don't really care that much about this. The nuts and bolts of this trade is basically you got AJ Brown, a first round pick that has a chance to be pretty high, and the 211 for the 103 and like a bunch of noise.
What? If you told me this trade was a trade without you getting a 24 first, I would have been like, okay, I guess that's, reasonable. The 103, the thirds, a couple of the filler players for AJ Brown and the 2. Sure. But why are you getting a first out of this? What is going on here? Like, what are you adding? Like, are you buying this guy dinner? Are you taking him to the movies on the side? Like, what's going on here? What type of collusion are you getting yourself into?
Yeah, well, I'm assuming this is the classic example. We've seen this in our own leagues of this guy's like, I'm screwed. I need a quarterback too. I'm going up for Bryce Young and I'll pay whatever it costs. And he probably, he's getting AJ Brown's point production off of his team, and he's also investing in a rookie quarterback. Hence why he's calling his first a leverage first round pick. It's possible that this pick ends up being decently high. Even if this is a middle first round pick, this is a very easy smash. Even if this is a late first round pick,
even if this is the 112.
Yeah.
It's an A++.
Yeah, definitely a great move there. So I have no disagreements there. Also an A+ for me. Lockwood is the next team. I guess both of these guys submit this trade here.
Yeah, so it was funny. So when I was scrolling through the comments, right, Lockwood submitted it from his perspective, and then later on in the replies, PNC later listed the trade in his comments. So I noticed the trade twice. So I'm like, we may as well just talk about them conjointly and kind of discuss the more context behind the trade, because obviously they're both going to give their sides of the table. So for Lockwood here, he says he's a contending team, 12-team, 1-quarterback PPR league. The tight end premium is at 8.75, so 1.75 points per tight end reception. He's got the 101 and the 107. Key pieces on the team are Hurts, McCaffrey, Eckler, Henry, ARSB, Metcalf, Hawkinson. So clearly a strong team that will also have the 101. Keep that in mind. And then on the vice versa, PNC is the 2022 champ, trading Kittle Olave to the 2023 front runner now. So, we can look at the deal and we can get our own thoughts on this.
Yeah, it's kind of weird that we're talking about trades just keep happening between two guys that were like in the championship against each other or are both contenders. So, at face value, I look at this trade and I see, in a tight end premium format, George Kittle is probably worth that 109 and Christian Kirk. I would say he's probably worth about that in this type of format. And then it's essentially Chris Olave for his teammate Alvin Kamara in the 105. I think generally speaking, this is probably a fair trade. I'm assuming PNC made this trade because he needed a quarterback, or maybe he needed Gibbs or whatever. He was going after somebody at 105, I'm assuming, is why he made this trade. But knowing that, Lockwood has Bijan that he's going to be adding to this team, he already is very strong at running back. He probably didn't need Gibbs. Again, I'm assuming that's why he made this trade. He gets an upgrade at tight end, Kittle over Hawkinson, but I will say it's pretty negligible, I would say, from like a long-term standpoint. And then Chris Olave adds to his wide receiver depth. I don't know. What are your thoughts?
It's a one quarterback league. So if that's Jahmyr Gibbs, I would be extremely shocked. With that being said, I want the Kittle and Olave side pretty significantly here.
Yeah, if it was a super flex trade, I would say this is probably fair. But yeah, if it's a one quarterback league, 105 is, you wanted QJ Addison. I don't know what player you were gunning after there, but that's fine, I suppose. But I'm just going to take Olave and Kittle. And having Kittle and Hawkinson, you can sell one of them. Probably Hawkinson would be the one that I would sell, given that you're in a competitive window and Hawkinson's worth more on the market right now. And you could maybe sell him off for another wide receiver or another running back, or maybe you pair him with Eckler and you go get a younger running back or something like that. I like Lockwood's side here. I think generally speaking, it was probably like an A- trade and like a C trade for both sides.
I would say A for Lockwood and C for Hoodie. Yeah, that's probably where I'd put it.
Yeah, I'm not exactly sure what you were hoping to get out of this PNC. Is my only thing. Because Kamara is like potentially going to get suspended. Christian Kirk doesn't you got a receiver back at least, but he doesn't really move the needle a ton. And the 109 and the 105 are also not moving the needle a ton from like a long-term perspective. I'm assuming you just needed depth. That's what I'm guessing.
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree. You probably needed depth here, but I will say in a 0.75 premium for George Kittle, like we're probably looking at, like Corey said, probably Kirk in the 109 for Kittle in that type of format. And then realistically, you're looking at Olave for Kamara in the 105 in a one quarterback league where the 105 is probably Jordan Addison or Quentin Johnson, like Corey said. Give me the Olave and Kittle side. Let me consolidate down.
Yeah, absolutely. So pretty good / bad trade, depending on whose side you're on there. FantasyCreeper will be the second last one that we look at here. Superflex, full PPR league. He receives Breece Hall and a 2024 third in exchange for Chris Olave and a 2024 second. So, this trade indicates that Breece Hall is more valuable than Chris Olave because he gets a second back on the Olave side. I know where both of us lean. I would prefer Chris Olave to Breece Hall in Dynasty. However, is there a scenario where you would prefer Breece Hall?
Yeah, so for me personally, again, if I'm in a startup scenario, I personally would take Chris Olave, especially if it's a PPR. If it's a half PPR, I think it's more of a debate. But in a PPR format specifically, I would go with the Chris Olave side. However, I do understand your scenario. If you're a contending team, you built up your wide receivers. Let's say you have Justin Jefferson, Garrett Wilson, I don't know, DK Metcalf, and you have a good wide receiver core with upside, but not a solidified running back one. And Chris Olave is maybe your wide receiver 3 or 4 in that type of situation. I do understand making the move for Breece. I prefer that it would be a straight up deal, but worst case, going from a 2 to a 3 is not going to kill you if Breece Hall ends up being a top 5 running back this year. So I'm not going to give it a high grade because I personally straight up on a value perspective would take Olave over Breece, but I'm still going to give it a fair, B- type of deal, because if it accomplishes your goal of giving you a stud type of running back to go and contend, I understand the rationale, and I do think it's a well put together type of idea.
Yeah, and it's possible if this is a league market that highly values running backs, that Breece Hall will be more valuable on the open market too, which is something, even though, like you said, we prefer Olave, his whole league might prefer Breece Hall. And if he wanted to sell Breece Hall at some point, he probably could do that with ease as a young running back who's probably going to have a breakout season, assuming he's healthy. So, yeah, I think it was a pretty solid move. I would like to know some team context. How many receivers can you start? How close is your team to competing, that kind of thing. But I'm assuming you made this because you're trying to be a contender and you needed a running back and you had to access that wide receiver. So pretty solid move. I'd say probably a B- trade for me as well. And then let's get into the final team here, which is from Matt Gruber here, a 12-team, 1-quarterback league. He sends away the 104 and the 110. He receives Garrett Wilson and a 2024 third. So the 104 in a 1-quarterback league for me is Jordan Addison. Jordan Addison in a 1-quarterback format is like a 3rd-round startup pick, probably, give or take, an early 3rd-round startup pick. Yep. Garrett Wilson's like the 5th or 6th player off the board in this format. And the 110, again, is Zach Charbonnet or something like that. This is an easy Garrett Wilson smash.
Yeah, all day. If this was a super flex, I think it gets close at that point, because then you're kind of comparing, okay, super flex format, would I rather have, CJ Stroud plus Will Levis, or would I rather have Garrett Wilson? And given current startup ADP, I think that would be a relatively fair market value deal. Because it's a 1-quarterback, it is Garrett Wilson, and it is not close. As much as I love Jordan Addison, you are praying that he becomes 80% of Garrett Wilson, to be quite frank. And then on the same time, it's the 110 in a 1-quarterback league in a depleted draft, because realistically at the top of the draft this year, you're having 3 quarterbacks, 4 by that point, propping the value up. The 110 is, you're hoping Devon Achane, you're hoping Zach Charbonnet, you're hoping, one of these tier 3 type of flex options.
Yeah, no, it's definitely not that valuable of a pick. So give me the Garrett Wilson side. That's an A+ deal. That would be like an A- deal in Superflex, to be honest. I would still take the Garrett Wilson side, but it's probably an A++ in a 1-quarterback league. So Agreed. Shout out to you guys, those of you that submitted a trade. Thank you for your participation. Hopefully we gave you what you needed, except for the one guy that we gave a D. Apologies for that one, but sorry about that. I mean, just being honest here. If you enjoyed this video, leave a like, subscribe, comment down below any of your thoughts. If you want personalized access to us, you can join the site, flockfantasy.com/FSE. You'll get first priority to Dynasty decisions. You also get first priority to these videos for what it's worth whenever we do them. And then also you'll get our Dynasty rankings. You'll get our best ball rankings. You'll get my rookie rankings that I referenced for the 2024 class. All the way too early rookie rankings are now out. Quarterbacks, running backs, wide receivers, top 5 film breakdowns, and traits and all that kind of stuff on the site live right now. And if you sign up annually using the promo code FSE, you'll get a free Zoom consultation with one of us, whichever one you prefer. So after you book that, again, just reach out to us and be like, hey, I booked my, annual Motherflocker subscription. I'm now going to book a Zoom call with whatever one of us you want to book it with. So check that out if you're interested. But with that being said, peace out, and we'll talk to you soon.